Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to show you guys how to use your standard 6-inch dial caliper seen right here. So let's go ahead and get started. So dial calipers are made up of the following different features or parts, if you will. The first thing you'll probably notice are the lower jaws or the large jaws for external measurements, and you'll be using these jaws for most of your measurements. And over here we have the upper jaws or smaller jaws for internal measurements or inner diameter measurements. And just below the upper jaws, we have what's called the reference edge, which is very important, and we'll talk more about the reference edge later when we start making measurements. And over here we have the slider, and this is the portion of the caliper that moves on a rack and pinion gear. And on the slider, we have what's called the dial, and it looks a lot like a clock, right? And like a clock has arms or a needle that moves. And in this case, a dial caliper is no different. The dial has what's called a dial indicator needle that moves around, which we'll use later when we make measurements, okay? And then the large protruding portion of our dial caliper is known as the blade, and within the blade we have our depth rod, okay? And then we can move our slider here using what's called the clamp screw. So the first thing you want to do before making a measurement is always make sure that your dial caliper is calibrated. So to do that, all right, notice the indicator needle here is not on zero. So what we want to do is go ahead and loosen our nut here and then turn this so that our needle is exactly on zero, and then go ahead and tighten this, okay, so it doesn't move. All right, now it's calibrated and ready to use. So we can use our dial calipers to make a lot of different measurements. The most common is to measure between our two jaws here. So we would open up our jaws and clamp down, and here's a typical measurement. And this is probably the most common type of measurement you're going to make using these two jaws here. But another measurement we can make is the inner diameter. So we can use these two jaws, the upper jaws here, and we can insert it here into our hole to measure the inner diameter, if you will, okay? And then finally, what if we want the whole depth? Well, this is where the depth rod comes in handy, this portion of our caliper right here. So we can move it back all the way up. Okay, and then we can rest the bottom of our caliper on the lip of our container here, and then we can insert our depth rod to the bottom, and there you have it. We can measure the depth of this hole. And the last type of measurement we can make with our dial calipers is called step distance. So let's say I want to measure the height of the lip of our container here. So what I can do is I can rest my caliper right on the lip, the bottom of the lip here, and I'll move my slider down to the top of the container, okay? And if you look at it, okay, you can see how my calipers are orientated, okay? And that's called step measurement. All right, so let's go ahead and start making a measurement with our dial calipers. So to do so, okay, like I said, most of your measurements are going to be made between the two jaws here of your dial caliper, okay? So let's go ahead and look here at this measurement. So let's say you want to measure this distance here, okay? So the first thing you want to look at here is take note of our reference edge here, okay? It's past the 2. So we know that this distance is at least 2 inches, okay? So we have 2 inches. Now let's go ahead and look here at the tenths of an inch. So we know it's past the 1, it's past the 2, and it's past the 3. So we know it's at least 2.3 inches long or in length. But now let's come on over here and look at our dial indicator needle here. Okay, so we see that our needle here is past the 7. So we know that this length is at least 2.37, okay? And then we count the tick marks, and we can see that it has 1, 2, 3 tick marks after the 7 or 70. So we say it would be 2.373 inches. All right, I would argue that we can go one step further as far as measurements go. If you carefully look at the needle here, you'll see that it's slightly past the 3rd tick mark. So this is where your personal sort of estimation comes in. So I would argue and say that this distance here is 2.3732 inches in total. Okay, so you can see how accurate dial calipers are. They're a very powerful tool for making measurements. That'll do it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.